You've been hearing a lot lately about the medical isotope crisis, the shortage caused by the emergency shutdown of the Chalk River reactor. The government warns hundreds of millions of dollars won't solve the problem. And now the Prime Minister says it's time to get out of the isotope business. It's all prompted many to question why Ottawa would just let go such a legacy, and whether it's time to dig out those design-flawed, mothballed money pits known as Maple 1 and 2. Here's Leslie McKinnon.
If this latest isotope shortage crisis sounds familiar, that's because it is. A year and a half ago, the reactor at Chalk River was shut down because of a safety dispute with the nuclear regulator. In a rare and dramatic emergency session very late at night, Parliament passed a bill that ordered the reactor back online. But this time, the 52-year-old reactor can't be legislated back. It is broken and will take 3 months and maybe more to fix. The result is a worldwide isotope shortfall and a significant blow to Canada's leadership in supplying much of the world with these high-tech medical devices.
A real catastrophe for the 2 million nuclear medicine patients in Canada.
Mais une véritable crise médicale.
We're going to have a shortage, it's going to bite, and it's going to be significant.
I think it's going to get far worse, not better.
The isotope crisis is worse this time because of a decision made a year ago to not go ahead with 2 new reactors. And these reactors, called Maple 1 and Maple 2, were supposed to replace the aging NRU reactor at Chalk River. But the Maple reactors were plagued with design problems, and they ended up costing hundreds of millions of dollars. Last May, 8 years after the Maple reactors were supposed to get started, Atomic Energy of Canada, or AECL, killed them, and any chances of Canada remaining a leader in this field. Isotopes from Chalk River are delivered to MDS Nordion in Canada. It's a private company that gives some of its isotope revenue back to AECL. Steve West is president of MDS Nordion. Selling isotopes is a lucrative business, and his company had been guaranteed decades of steady supply once the Maples were working by AECL.
It was a complete shot out of the dark. We had no idea. We were planning to get these isotopes by the end of 2008.
We're really going to see the loss.
Dr. Robert Atcher from the U.S. is the outgoing president of the Society of Nuclear Medicine, the body of doctors that was counting on Canada's Maples project to produce isotopes for years to come.
I can't, it's not broadcast worthy. It was, again, just before our annual meeting of the Society of Nuclear Medicine, and it was devastating.
The decision to kill the Maple reactors meant that the only option was that the old NRU reactor at Chalk River would have to go non-stop, producing isotopes for several more years. There would be no backup. To rely solely on the old reactor would be a huge risk.
Oh, for sure. I think that it's not. I would say that the degree of lack of management and lack of risk management, particularly in this, is profoundly shocking.
Linda Keane is past president of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. She says there was no plan if the old reactor broke down.
Every company, private or public, has to have a sense of what would you do if, and what are the chances if. And any person who, outside of this particular circumstance, would tell you that a 52-year-old reactor is very old. It was meant to be closed down in 2000. It was designed to be closed in 2000. So in fact, what we're looking at is a very risky proposition. They took very significant risks.
It's really devastating to us.
Dr. Robert Atcher says the Americans would have built more reactors to produce isotopes, but because the Canadian government was promising that the Maple reactors were coming on stream, the U.S. held back. So do you think that was a kind of implied contract, that Canada would keep supplying isotopes?
My interpretation was that it in fact was we didn't get anything in writing. There wasn't a literal contract, but I think there was an implied contract that they would actually supply the material for us, and that was why we stopped our production project. Personally, I feel like we got let down by making that decision to stop the Maples project.
To increase their medical isotope output by at
These days, Steve West and his staff at MDS Nordion are glued to question period, where the isotope shortage issue has once again become a political crisis. Yet the government supports scuttling the Maple reactors because it says they never worked as designed.
The reactor, the core, it did not work, and it did not produce a single medical isotope.
And that's somewhat misleading. Both Maples have gone critical. In other words, they've been nuclear and they've gone through those reactions. So actually, the reactors did make isotopes. They just weren't extracted out of the reactor.
There is some controversy about whether it's just too costly to get the Maple reactors working, although that's not what AECL says. Here's the president of AECL, Hugh McDermott, testifying at a government committee.
Even if we were to take the decision tomorrow morning, for whatever set of reasons, to try to return the Maples to service, it would be many years and many hundreds of millions of dollars before those reactors would be licensable and able to be put into service.
But take a look at this report from the prestigious National Academy of Sciences, the body of scholars that's been advising the U.S. Congress on science for almost 150 years. The report says that the cost of replacing the reactor cores of the Maples would likely be small, tens of millions of dollars. Steve West's company, MDS Nordion, is now suing the federal government for breach of contract over the shutdown of the Maple reactors. He thinks the cheapest solution is for government to hire an international consortium to rebuild the Maples.
The Maple reactors are finished. The building's there. They've already been powered up. It's just a matter of getting the experts in and working with the regulator to finish the project.
But aren't you getting pretty strong signals from government that there's no way that's going to happen?
Well, that's what we've heard so far. We'd like the government to reconsider its position.
Of course, the fallback is the 52-year-old NRU reactor at Chalk River. Once it's fixed, the government's plan is to get it relicensed to keep producing isotopes until 2016. But look at the cost of the upgrades the aging reactor will need in order to run for several more years. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences was told by a Canadian government official that this upgrade would require expenditures of hundreds of millions of dollars. Inside, the old NRU at Chalk River still resembles the 50s-style industrial operating center that it is. Still, for 30 years, this aging machine was pretty good at steadily churning out more isotopes than any other reactor in the world. But if making isotopes is now too expensive, too problem-prone, maybe government needs to debate whether this is a public good or a business. And if it's a business, should government be subsidizing it?
It's partly just the government's role in terms of subsidizing basic science.
Is there an argument, though, that the private sector should be doing this job of producing isotopes, and government shouldn't have to?
My understanding is that there has been a debate about that here in Canada when people realize the amount of money that's being spent on that. But government subsidizes other activities. You know, airports are subsidized so that people can travel, and in most countries, train travel is subsidized. So the government does subsidize other business activities. It's just that this one seems to be a little unusual because it's a radioisotope.
Should we be producing this as a public good at one end, the radioisotopes, and dispensing it as a public good at the other end, and there's businesses in between? I think that it's become so politicized that I really wonder if the solution can be found without a complete rethink of what we're doing here.
Canada was a world leader in producing radioisotopes. This is a Canadian legacy at Chalk River. But in recent years, bad management, poor design, and cost overruns have made this industry a political liability that the government is backing away from. Leslie McKinnon, CBC News, Ottawa.